Trump's one big, beautiful bill just passed the Senate after a marathon 27-hour session. Now, you might be wondering, what does that actually mean for me? Is it good, bad, complicated? Well, it's a little of everything. And what I'll share later might surprise you, especially if you're a senior on Medicaid, have kids, or work in a job that relies on tips. So yeah, stay with me, because understanding what's in this bill could make a real difference for how you plan the rest of this year, and maybe even the next decade. Before we jump in, let me know in the comments, what part of this bill worries you most? Is it healthcare? Taxes? Just tell me what's on your mind. And if this kind of straight talk financial breakdown is helpful, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Okay, so here's what just happened. The Senate passed President Trump's massive tax and spending bill, his flagship legislation of this term. It's being called one big, beautiful bill. And honestly, that's not just branding. This thing is huge, over 900 pages long, and it's got something in it for just about everybody. Whether that's good or bad depends a lot on where you stand. Let's start with what's in it for working folks, because that's where a lot of attention is going. For starters, if you're someone who works in the service industry, maybe a restaurant, salon, hotel, you'll now be able to deduct up to $25,000 in tip income from your taxable income. That's huge. I know a lot of people who work double shifts and still feel like taxes eat away half their earnings. So this helps. But there's a catch. If you make over $150,000 as an individual or $300,000 as a couple, the benefit starts to phase out. So it's definitely targeted more at low to middle income earners. Also, there's a new deduction for overtime pay. Same deal. If you're putting in those extra hours, you can write off more of what you earn. That's something folks have been asking for years, especially with inflation, making everyone stretch their paycheck a little further. And guess what? There's a new senior deduction too. If you're 65 or older, you may qualify for a $6,000 bonus deduction. That's up from the $4,000 version the House was originally considering. It starts phasing out for individuals who make over $75,000 or couples over $150,000. But still, if you're on a fixed income, every bit helps. Now let's talk kids. If you have a child born between 2024 and 2028, they could get something called a Trump account. It's a government-seeded savings plan with a $1,000 deposit, meant to grow over time in an index fund. It's not cash you can spend now, but it's a financial head start. And for families who never had the means to open a 529 or brokerage account, this could be a pretty powerful tool. It's automatic too, no application required. That part's nice. Also, a lot of people have asked, what about auto loans? The bill includes a deduction for interest paid on certain U.S.-assembled auto loans. It's capped at $10,000 and doesn't apply to every loan, but if you bought a car recently, it might be worth taking another look at your paperwork come tax season. So, on the surface, this all sounds pretty good, right? But, and this is a big but, there's another side to the story. Because to make room for all these tax cuts, the bill cuts spending. And not just a little. We're talking about deep cuts to programs like Medicaid and SNAP, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, commonly called food stamps. So here's what's changing. First, Medicaid. The bill adds a new federal work requirement for adults between 19 and 64 who don't have a disability. You'll have to prove 80 hours a month of work, volunteering, or training. And unless you have a child under 14, the exemption for parents no longer applies. A lot of folks will be caught off guard by that one. Also, eligibility checks now happen every 6 months instead of once a year. That sounds small, but in practice it means more paperwork, more deadlines, more chances to get kicked off coverage for missing a form or deadline. And when you combine all of that, the Congressional Budget Office estimates that nearly 8 million people will lose Medicaid by 2034. That's not nothing. And then there's SNAP. Similar work requirements, but with a new twist. If a state has a high error rate in its benefits distribution, they now have to pay part of the cost out of their own pocket. That's going to hit poorer states the hardest. And for some 600,000 low-income families, monthly food assistance could drop by about $100. So you see the pattern. The bill gives with one hand through deductions and credits, but it takes away with the other by scaling back government support for lower-income families. And depending on your personal situation, you might get a little help from the tax code, but lose a lot more in healthcare or food support. And then there's energy. This one stirred up a lot of conversation. Under this bill, nearly all of the clean energy tax credits passed during the Biden years are being rolled back. That includes incentives for electric vehicles, solar panels, heat pumps, all the stuff you see in those home upgrade ads. They're gone or set to expire very soon. So what's replacing them? New tax breaks for fossil fuel production. Coal, oil, gas. Excise taxes on fossil fuels are being removed, and credits are being introduced for coal production, especially in U.S. facilities. If you work in energy or you live in a state like Texas or West Virginia, this might sound like a return to stability. But for clean energy startups and solar companies, many of which had planned big expansions based on those credits, this is a serious reversal. And here's something I didn't expect when I read the bill. There's a section on space. Yes, space. $10 billion is going toward Mars mission planning. Another $325 million to help deorbit the International Space Station. And $85 million is going to move the space shuttle from Virginia to Texas. That last one sparked a lot of jokes online. But space exploration is part of the broader defense budget in this bill, which also includes $29 billion for shipbuilding and $25 billion for missile defense. And speaking of defense, the border provisions are one of the most heavily funded parts. $46.5 billion is going to expand the border wall and install new surveillance. $45 billion more is going toward detention centers, and $30 billion to train new ICE agents. There's also a $100 fee now for people seeking asylum. So, while the tax cuts are getting most of the headlines, this bill is also massively ramping up funding for military and immigration enforcement. That's a pretty clear reflection of the current administration's priorities. But here's the part that a lot of people are still wrapping their heads around: the cost. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that this bill will add $3.3 trillion to the national deficit over the next 10 years. Some estimates, once you factor in interest and extended provisions, say it's closer to $5.3 trillion. Though, supporters say it's worth it. They see it as an investment in growth, energy independence, and national security. Critics say it's a wealth transfer, cutting support for the poor and giving breaks to the wealthy. And the data does show that households making over $217,000 a year will get the biggest tax cut, around $12,500 on average. Households making under $35,000 will see about $150. It's a pretty stark difference. Even though that sounds tough to hear, it's worth knowing. Because when you understand the numbers, you can better plan for what's ahead. One more thing before we wrap. There's still one step left. The House has to approve the Senate's version. If they do that without changes, the bill heads straight to President Trump's desk, maybe even before the 4th of July. But if they make edits, the Senate has to reconvene. And with lawmakers heading home for the holiday, that could slow everything down. So now you're probably thinking, what does this mean for you? Well, if you're a senior, you might want to look into that new deduction. If you're a tipped worker, keep records of your tips this year. If you're on Medicaid or SNAP, it's time to stay alert for state-level changes. If you're counting on tax credits for solar or an EV purchase, maybe hold off for now and see what happens in the final version. And also, this is one of those times where talking about it actually helps, because a lot of people don't know how much of this could affect them. So share this with someone who might benefit. And if you're still unsure how it all works together, leave a comment and let's talk it through. Thanks for spending your time here. I know this stuff isn't always easy to follow, but the fact that you're here, that you care enough to learn more, that's what makes a difference. See you in the next one.